Good evening and welcome to Mining the Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, June 6, 2024. Before we begin, I want to take care of a little housekeeping. Of course, a week from tonight, June 13th, we will not be together due to the holiday of Shavuot. 2 weeks from tonight, June 20th, we will not be together here. There will be no Mining the Riches of the Parsha here on June 20th. Instead, I will be part of a panel discussion put on by ADATH Congregation, also on Zoom. The subject is end-of-life care, and I will be speaking along with the others are very distinguished experts and speakers. I'm honored to be among them. And there is a separate registration for that Zoom. So I sent that out in the email, and it's also on our website, and I'll be sending it out by email again. But if you want to join us on June 20th, it's a separate login, a separate link. You have to register. It's through ADATH. And if you're interested, if you want to join, it won't just be me. It'll be 3 others. And you'll decide what you want to do. I am so grateful to all of you for being here tonight, putting aside some time for us to study together, to look at insights both on this week's Torah portion and also insights on the holiday of Shavuot, which is coming up just next week. So in this week's Torah portion, the Parsha BaMidbor, we begin the 4th of the 5 books of the Torah, BaMidbor, the book of Numbers. And in this week's Torah portion, the Parsha BaMidbor, we learn about the organization and structure of the tribes, the 12 tribes, as they traveled for 40 years from Egypt to Israel. And each tribe had a nasi, a prince, one person who was in charge, the leader of that tribe. There were 12 of them. Now, at the beginning of this week's portion, the Torah tells us, L'Gad, concerning the tribe of Gad. Gad is the name of one of the tribes. It was one of Yaakov's sons, one of the tribes. So the nasi of the tribe of Gad, his name was Eliasaph ben Deuel. Eliasaph, the son of Deuel. That's his name. The curious thing is that a little bit later in the middle of our Torah portion, the Torah says, V'nasi livnei Gad, and the prince, the head of the tribe of Gad was Eliasaph ben Reuel. Eliasaph, the son of Reuel. Now, Deuel that starts with a dalet and Reuel that starts with a resh, yes, the 2 letters are a little bit similar, but it can't just be a mistake. I mean, the Torah comes directly from God. There are no mistakes in the Torah. So which was it? Was his name the son of Deuel or the son of Reuel? And why is there a discrepancy between one place and another? There are several answers to this question. I want to share with you what I think is a brilliant answer given by Rabbi Chaim Azulai, who's known as the Chidah. He was a Sephardic scholar, a very prolific and influential scholar of Jewish law and Jewish commentary. And here's what he says. He says the correct name is Deuel with a dalet at the beginning. But sometimes he is called Reuel as a reward. Ben Reuel, the son of Reuel, is a title of honor because Reuel means a friend of God. Because this man, Eliasaph ben Deuel, Eliasaph the son of Deuel, he had a reason. He was the head of his tribe, an important person. He had a reason to be upset. He had a reason to protest. He had a reason to complain. But he did not. Because there was another tribe younger than him, and this younger tribe was given an honor and put before him, and it was not fair So he had a reason to be upset, a legitimate reason to be upset, but he remained silent. And we all know how difficult that can be. And therefore, he was rewarded for all time by the Torah referring to him sometimes as Ben Reuel, a friend of God. I have a set of Sfarim, a set of books. This is one of the volumes. It's called Stei Chemed. It's 9 volumes, so this is one. So it takes up, let's say, about this much on my shelf. And it was written by Rabbi Chizkiah Medini in the mid-1800s. Now, what this is, and I must tell you, I used to use this very regularly. My edition, my copy is pretty much worn. And I confess to you that I have not used this in a number of years. In the recent years, I haven't used it, and I'll explain why. But it was written, Stei Chemed, it's the name of the work, written by Rabbi Chizkiah Medini, as I said, in the mid-1800s. And this is the first encyclopedia of Talmudic law. That is, what he did was, he took 1,800 years of Talmudic discussion, and he distilled it and organized it according to the alphabet, and he produced this work called Stei Chemed. Now, I confess I don't use it much today because I have it on the internet. There's a website, and you should all know about this. There's a website called Sefaria, Sefaria. It is an amazing website. It is a complete library of Jewish thought, law, commentary. It's all there. It's an incredible translated commentaries, hyperlinked, Sefaria.com. You should look into it. I have another set called Encyclopedia Talmudit, the Talmudic Encyclopedia. Now, here in this work, this is a modern work, the topics also, all of Talmudic law. It's arranged according to the alphabet. However, this set has 300 scholars working on it, and they've been working on this for decades. They started the work in 1947, and they're up to volume 51, and volume 51 contains topics with the letter Mem. That means they're halfway through the alphabet. Rabbi Medini basically wrote the equivalent of the Encyclopedia Britannica by himself in the 1800s. With no internet, he had no library, he had no resources, and he had no index. He did it all from memory. It is literally unbelievable. I don't mean figuratively, I mean literally. It defies credibility. But he did. Not only to memorize thousands of volumes of Talmudic law, and it's not easy subjects, complicated, detailed, but not only did he memorize it, but he was able to distill it and organize it and present it in this way that every reader can make use of it. It's incredible. Without exaggerating, it is one of the greatest human intellectual feats that I know of. So, even more incredible, if there could be anything more incredible, listen to this. Rabbi Medini told his family that when he was a young man, he did not have any kind of special memory, and he did not have any kind of special intellectual talents. He was a normal, average student. However, something happened. He did something. And after that incident, he felt, this is what he told his family, he felt that somehow he became elevated and somehow developed these superhuman powers of memory and intellect. And here's the story he told his family. When he was a student, I guess probably in his early 20s, he was studying in a yeshiva, an academy of advanced Jewish learning, and there were many Talmudic scholars learning there. And there was another student who was jealous of him. So what this other student did is, there was a woman who would come in every afternoon to clean up in the yeshiva, to clean the rooms. And this other student gave a bribe to the cleaning woman to publicize that Medini had engaged in inappropriate behavior with her. She accepted the bribe. She made this claim. Everyone believed her. And Medini suffered such shame and embarrassment. He had to leave this yeshiva. He had to run away. Now, the head of this yeshiva really didn't believe this woman. And also he fired her because he didn't believe her, so he fired her. But it didn't help Medini because his reputation was ruined. His name was in the mud. Sometime later, the bribe money ran out. And this woman who used to clean, but she'd been fired, she didn't have any money. And she had no income. She couldn't feed herself and her family. So she found this young man, Medini, and she said to him, I want to confess to you a terrible sin that I did. I slandered you, and what I said was not true. I took a bribe. And she said to him, I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. If you'll forgive me, here's what she said to him. If you forgive me, I will go back to that yeshiva. I will publicly proclaim your innocence. I'll tell everyone that the whole thing was untrue and that I accepted this bribe. I'll take all the responsibility. I just ask you to do one thing. Please go back to the head of this yeshiva and tell him to hire me again because I have no money. I have no way to feed myself and my family. Ask him to that's all I ask. Just to rehire me so I have a job. Well, Medini was tempted to accept this offer and to be able to reclaim his reputation. But then he thought about it. And he realized if he would go back and this woman would publicly proclaim that what she said before was false and Medini was innocent of the rumors, not only would there be one Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name, but now there would be two. Because for one Talmudic scholar to be accused of an illicit affair, everyone who hears about it will say, that's how Talmud scholars are supposed to act. What hypocrites. It's a desecration of God's name. When a religious person, people say about him that he did such a terrible thing. But if I go back and she proclaims my innocence, what's going to happen? My name has already been dragged in the mud. That was one Chilul Hashem. Yes, it was untrue, but it doesn't matter. It still desecrated God's name because people still thought, how could a Talmudic scholar do that? But now if I go back and she proclaims my innocence, there'll be two acts of Chilul Hashem, desecration of God's name, because now people are going to say, you know how bad this situation is? There was another student who was so mean and so jealous that he was willing to bribe this woman to tell a lie that he did something wrong when he didn't do it. a double Chilul Hashem, desecration of God's name. So he said to his family, he decided that he would do nothing. He would go back to the head of the yeshiva and quietly ask him to rehire this woman, but on the condition that this woman never reveal the truth. Imagine the selflessness to do something like that. Imagine the sacrifice not to speak out to restore his own reputation because he's worried about what people will say about God and God's Torah and those who study God's Torah. And he told his family that after that incident, he became a different person. All of a sudden, he had this super intellectual prowess that he'd never had before. He had this incredible memory that he never had before. Imagine one person sitting down by themselves in a room and single-handedly writing what is the equivalent of an entire encyclopedia from memory. Why did he merit this gift? He said to his family, it was because he kept his mouth shut, because he did not complain, even though he certainly had a legitimate reason to speak out or to have this other woman speak out. Now, we all know people who complain constantly for no reason. But to hold back when we do have a complaint, when speaking up might embarrass someone else or some other negative consequence would occur, if we can have that kind of self-control in that situation, it would transform our lives. It would turn us into Ru'el, a friend of God. So I want to share something that it's going to sound boastful and arrogant, and I'm sorry for that, but the truth is the truth. And the truth is that I make the best eggplant parmesan that I have ever tasted. And I take no credit for it. Here's the story. When Marcy and I first got married, it's now over 43 years. Thank God, going strong. Right a week after our wedding, we moved to Israel. For the first year of our marriage, we lived in Israel. I was studying, Marcy was working. We had very long hours, and we had very little money. So we almost never went out to eat. But once in a while, there was a restaurant we found. This is 43 years ago. And the restaurant in Jerusalem, in the center of Jerusalem, the restaurant was called Mamma Mia's. It was a dairy Italian restaurant. Tiny little place. It was just off Ben Yehuda Street, a tiny little place. And we would go there, and we just thought the food there was just the best that we'd ever had. So we would go once in a while. We would have one bowl of soup, we'd share it. We'd have one main course, we'd share it. And that was just... And our favorite dish was eggplant parmesan. Now, I like eggplant parmesan. I've had it many times. But this version of eggplant parmesan was the best I ever tasted in my life. It's a unique flavor. I can't describe it to you, but it's just the best I've ever had. About 18 years later, Marcy and I went back to Israel for a visit. This time we brought our 4 children. And we learned that Mamma Mia's had closed and reopened in a new location just a few blocks away. It's on It was on King George. I'm very sorry to say that since it's closed, but at that time it was open. It was on King George. And instead of a little bitty tiny little place, it was now a large expanded place. It was a beautiful old house that was transformed into this restaurant, and they had a large courtyard with trees and bushes and flowers, and there was a fragrance. And we went back because we hadn't been in whatever it was, 15, 18 years. And it was just so delicious and so wonderful. And to sit outside and to have dinner on a beautiful Jerusalem summer night with our family, our children there, it was just incomparable. And the food was exactly the way we remembered it. And of course, each time we went, we got eggplant parmesan. This time, of course, we could get a few other things, Baruch Hashem. And it was exactly the way we remembered it, just as good. And it's rare when you have a memory of something from a long time ago, and then you happen upon the same thing now. Usually it doesn't live up to your memory, and this one did. It was exactly the same. So one night we're at the restaurant with our children. It was kind of late. We were eating dinner, delicious, delicious dinner. And I got up to go inside to, I think, use the restroom. And as I walked by, I just happened to glance in the kitchen. I saw it was not so busy. Most people had left already. In the kitchen, there was a chef, and there was maybe one or two workers, but it was kind of winding down for the evening. And I don't know how this came into my head, but I went into the kitchen, and I went over to the chef, and I told him this story. I said, we're back now after all these years. We remember the eggplant parmesan, and it was so good. First of all, thank you, bravo to you, the chef. It's so delicious. Would you please give me the recipe? And this chef, he was very gracious. He said, sure. And he gave me the recipe, and I wrote it down. I brought it home. And the most incredible thing is we got home and we made it and it tasted just the same. We were able to recreate it exactly. And since then, this is the eggplant parmesan recipe that we've been using. And it is the best. It is just the best. Now, I'm not asking you to take my word for it because Marcy and I did a cooking demonstration on Zoom and it's on YouTube from May 2020. So you can watch that video and you can see us making the eggplant parmesan. And also, if you send me an email after this class, I will gladly send you the recipe and you can judge for yourself. Now, I tell you this long story because this Tuesday night, we begin the Yom Tov, the holiday of Shavuos. The holiday where we celebrate the Jewish people gathered around Mount Sinai as God reveals God's Torah to us. Arguably the most important event in all of Jewish history. The event that gives us the wisdom and the holiness and the identity and the mission that makes us Jews. Now, the main observance that a lot of people have is to stay up late on the first night of Shavuos learning Torah. And to engage in extra Torah learning throughout the holiday. So let me just mention an invitation. This coming Wednesday evening, the first day of Shavuos at 7:15 p.m., you're all invited to come to ADATH in Hampstead, 7:15 p.m. Martine Cohen and I, you know Martine Cohen, she's an amazing teacher. She and I will be co-teaching, leading a discussion on the subject of honor your father and mother, one of the 10 commandments, and we'll have cheesecake. So you're all invited to come. Okay. Wednesday morning in the synagogue, we read the narrative in the Torah about the giving of the Torah at Sinai, and we read the Aseret Dibros, the 10 commandments. On Thursday, a week from today, the second day of Shavuos here, we read the book of Ruth. We say Yizkar. Okay. But the most widespread minhag, custom of Shavuos, and the most delicious, is to eat dairy foods. Cheesecake and blintzes and ice cream and eggplant parmesan. And that's why I urge you to try my recipe, because you could use it on Shavuos. The question, though, is why? Why dairy foods on Shavuos? What's the connection between dairy foods and receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai? So there's a popular answer, but I have to tell you it's a little weak. The answer that is given is that when God gave the laws of the Torah to the Jewish people, on Shavuos, that included the laws of keeping kosher. So all of a sudden, at that moment, they had to start keeping kosher. And that meant that their dishes were treif, they were non-kosher. Their meat was treif, was non-kosher, because they hadn't yet had the laws of keeping kosher. And the easiest and quickest meal they could make from scratch was a dairy meal. So since they had a dairy meal on Shavuos, we have dairy on Shavuos. Okay. Maybe. The answer's a little weak. But I want to give you a deeper answer. A much better answer. And it goes like this. One of the books of the Torah is Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, written by Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon. Shir HaShirim is a poetic love song of God and the Jewish people. And the Torah is described in Shir HaShirim as dvash v'chalav, honey and milk, sweet and nourishing. So, since we received the Torah on Shavuos, in order to celebrate how sweet and nourishing the Torah is for us, we eat these foods that are sweet and have milk in them, dairy foods. And that is a very deep and a very important answer. Because all too often, many of us look at God's commandments, especially if we don't want to keep them, as intrusive, burdensome. Why should I do that? Why can I not do that? Why does God care if I do that or I don't do that? I can understand that response. But the truth is that every Jewish practice is milk and honey, sweet and nourishing, a treat to enjoy that can make our life more meaningful and more delicious. On Shavuos, we celebrate not just the content of the Torah that we received at Mount Sinai on the date of Shavuos, but the way in which observing the commandments of God, the mitzvos of Hashem, nourishes us and brings us closer to God. I want to share one more piece with you tonight. There is a misconception among some concerning the thinking and teaching of the Rav, Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, the great scholar that I quote to you so often. The Rav is widely known as a rationalist, in the model of the Rambam Maimonides, who held that reason and logic are the supreme ways to serve God and to know God. One of the Rav's major works is titled Halachic Man. I have quoted it to you before. We've discussed it. And it gives some people the impression that the Rav stayed clear of any kind of mystical leanings or ecstatic connection to God in favor of dry, formal practice. And this view is woefully incomplete. And I'm indebted to my friend and my colleague, Rabbi Hanan Balk, for drawing my attention to this. There's a volume that was published posthumously by the Rav titled Abraham's Journey. And he writes there the following: man is overcome by a great passion to be in communion with the Almighty and as close to God as possible. There is a romance between man and God. Man has an uncontrollable, powerful longing and invisible craving and desire to unite with God, to be close to God, to be submerged into God. Now, Rabbi Soloveitchik certainly believed and taught that divine encounters could and did occur in life. But he also envisioned within halacha, within religious observance, an effort to arouse such an awareness in a normative sense. So I want to share with you just one example that will hopefully deepen our appreciation, our experience of Shavuos, this coming Wednesday and Thursday, when we commemorate God's revelation to the entire Jewish people at Mount Sinai, as I said, and God speaking the Aseret Dibros, the Ten Commandments, and also to deepen our experience every single time the Torah is read in the synagogue. Monday and Thursday, and Shabbos morning, and Yom Tov, and Shabbos afternoon. And the insight comes as follows. There are two interesting, connected features of Torah reading in the synagogue. One is, there is a difference of practice among different congregations during the Torah reading in the synagogue. In some congregations, the people sit. In some congregations, people stand. At ADATH, most people sit, a few people stand. In other places, most or all stand. What's the reason for the difference of practice? Well, sitting makes sense. Not because it makes it easier to talk or to take a nap. That's not the reason. Sitting makes sense if the congregation is supposed to be studying the Torah as it is read, which is correct. So we would sit as we normally do when we study. We're sitting. We're studying. Why do some people stand? Why in some places does almost everyone stand? That's question number one. Question number two is as follows. When we read the Torah in the synagogue, it makes sense for the person who is called to the Torah for an aliyah to make a bracha, a blessing, before and after the reading. Before reading from the Torah, the person who has the aliyah makes the bracha, blessing. Blessed are you, God, King of the universe. Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. You chose us from among all the nations. You gave us the opportunity to have and to study your Torah, God, for it to enlighten and ennoble our lives. Blessed are you, God, for that. That's what we say before we read it. After we read the portion, the person who has the aliyah says a second bracha, a second blessing. Blessed are you, God, King of the universe. Asher nasal lanu Torahs emes. Now that we read from the Torah, I am proclaiming, blessed are you, God, that you gave us the Torah which is true. What we just read, the Torah is true. V'chaye olam nata b'sachenu, and you have planted within us eternal life. With this Torah that you've given us, we can feel it as we're reading it. We assert these words that we have just heard. We assert that they originally came directly to us from God, and they express ultimate truth. Okay, all that makes sense. But before that first bracha, the first blessing, we have an introductory line. It's a call and response with the congregation. The person who has the aliyah, who's making the bracha, starts and he says, Baruch Hu es Hashem Hamvarach, blessed God, bless God, the Blessed One, and everyone in the congregation answers, Baruch Hashem Hamvarach li'olam v'oled, blessed is the name of God forever and ever, for all eternity. Now, that call and response, that's like the introduction to the blessing, that's a repetition of a call and response from earlier in Shacharis, in the morning service. Before the section that contains the Shema, it's really the beginning of when the congregation comes together as a congregation to start to pray. The chazan, the cantor, the person leading the services says, Baruch Hu es Hashem Hamvarach, bless God, the Blessed One. And the congregation answers, Baruch Hashem Hamvarach li'olam v'oled, that same call and response. And that really is the way that we say we're all gathered together to bless God, to praise God, to pray to God. Let's start. Now, what's it doing here? Why do we repeat it? Why every single person who's called to the Torah for an Aliyah starts with that call and response line? It doesn't have anything to do with the Torah or Torah learning. Why do we include it? So the Rav explains both of these questions based on an insight from Rabbi Meir of Rottenburg. This line, Baruch Hu es Hashem Hamvarach, that's said by the chazan, the person leading the morning service, is a recognition that a minyan has gathered, a congregation has gathered, a tzibur, to pray not as individuals, each one sitting next to each other, but as a tzibur, as a community that's united and bonded together, praising God and praying to God, representing the entire Jewish people. And in doing so, there is a revelation of God's presence. There is hashras hashchina, just like God's revelation at Mount Sinai to the Jewish people. So when the chazan says, Baruch Hu es Hashem Hamvarach, we all respond to this revelation with this line, the call and response. Bless God, the Blessed One, because God's presence is now located amidst us. And when this happens, of course, we're all standing, right? When we get to the line of Baruch Hu, the beginning of Shacharis, we're all standing because out of respect for the Shekhinah, God's presence, which is now joining us. Rabbi Meir of Rottenburg says, likewise, when we read the Torah in the synagogue, we are reenacting the revelation at Sinai. And the Rav explains that the Shekhinah, God's presence, is actually there whenever the Torah scroll is removed from the ark for reading in the synagogue. So each person who's called to the Torah starts with Baruch Hu es Hashem Hamvarach to recognize and to respond to God's imminent presence. And that's the reason that, at least in some places, the people stand with this awesome awareness that in our synagogue right now, God is present amidst us. We're reliving Sinai at this moment. Shavuos specifically, and Torah reading on the first day of Shavuos, which is, as I mentioned, the narrative and content of this revelation and the Aseret Dibros, the Ten Commandments. This is therefore the origin of the feeling we should have with every Torah reading all year long. The epitome of our great passion to be in communion with God, our romance with God, our powerful longing to unite with God. That is what we aspire to and try to feel and experience on Shavuos. And every time during the year, we're present at the synagogue's Torah reading. My friends, I want to wish you a beautiful evening, a great Shabbos, and a joyous and wonderful and uplifting Shavuos holiday. And I look forward to seeing you all soon in person.